I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thanks for being with me here on this Monday. And for the next half hour, you will hear a provocative discussion on race in America. After a huge weekend here, a jury decided that a Hispanic man who shot an unarmed black teenager is not guilty of murder in the second degree. This case has inspired emotion, perhaps anger, rage, confusion. One side upset over lack of justice, the other confident in America's legal system.
When doesn't anything play into the race narrative?
People feeling like they are treated differently in this country.
What is the pace for which a black man walk in America?
Across America, hundreds hit the streets to protest. We'll break down their complaints. Plus, a provocative letter surfaces. Dear George Zimmerman, you'll now get an idea what it feels like to be a black man in America. And how to explain the verdict to young people of all races.
What do I tell him now? As a lawyer, as a mother.
Well, with me now, Mo Ivory, attorney and host of radio's Mo Ivory Show. Also, David Webb will be joining us momentarily, co-founder of the NYC Tea Party. Buck Davis here in Studio 7, a diversity and inclusion expert. And Ruben Navarrete, a syndicated columnist for the Washington Post Writers Group. So, Ruben, welcome back to you. Welcome to every single one of you. And we just want to go there in every which way because this is such an important story that has resonated across this country. So first, let me just read you a letter. And I think, from what I understand, there are many letters similar to this. So there's a young man on Facebook by the name of Alex Frazier, and he has written this letter. This is what he said. Dear George Zimmerman, for the rest of your life, you are now going to feel like what it's like to be a black man in America. You will feel people stare at you, judging you for what you think are unfair reasons. You will lose out on getting jobs for something you feel is outside of your control. You will believe yourself to be an upstanding citizen and wonder why people choose to not see that. It goes on. People will cross the street when they see you coming. They will call you hurtful names. It will drive you so insane some days that you'll want to scream at the top of your lungs. But you will have to wake up the next day, put on a firm look, and push through life. His final line, I bet you never thought that by shooting a black male, you would end up inheriting all of his struggles. Enjoy your freedom. Sincerely, a black male who could have been Trayvon Martin. It's a powerful letter. It has been shared more than 75,000 times on Facebook. You're wowing.
Wow. I read that letter last night, and it was being passed around Facebook, and I saw it, and I read it, and I thought it was really very intense and a very great analogy, although I do feel a little bit differently about why a black man has to go through those struggles in America versus why George Zimmerman has to go through this struggle now.
Very different reasons.
Very different reasons.
But you do feel like it's a fair comparison.
I think it's a fair comparison in that there are just these things that a black man goes through that are about the stares, are about the judgments without having a basis. Now, for George Zimmerman, he deserves every bit of every judgment that is coming his way, and I have no feelings about that. But for the situation for black men, it is a very good analogy because that is what black men go through in all of the stereotypes that are put on them every day, all of the judgments, all of the sort of blockage that they have in their lives trying to just live in America.
Ruben, why do you think that this case is so emotional?
Because it plays into an existing narrative that a lot of people have that the criminal justice system doesn't work for African Americans, and that when African Americans step into a courtroom, more times than not throughout our history, it has not gone well, justice has not been served. The problem, I think, in this case is nobody knows what happened that particular night in Sanford, Florida on February 26th of last year, other than one person who's gone, one person who didn't testify at his own trial. And we have also the peculiar nature of the Florida laws, the Stand Your Ground law. These seem to be very specific things, and my problem is that when we take this and make it global, it suddenly becomes about the contempt that people have for African-American men in particular in our society. If you want to go from here to there, it's a long way home. And I don't think we can get there.
Here's the but, though, that some people are pointing out, the fact that obviously this is an incredibly tragic story, even the president pointing that out and saying, listen, you know, that the jury has spoken, please, peace. But the fact that there are many young African Americans who are killed, you look at Chicago, for example, each and every weekend, dozens of young African Americans are killing other young African Americans. Why not the same level of outrage, rallying in Chicago?
Well, I have a perspective on the emotion that I see playing out in America. I think there needs to be more education around the justice system. I mean, it is a very complicated system, and what I found over the last year following this trial is that our justice system is really not all about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. What I think the justice system is about is scraping up as much evidence as you can find and creating the most compelling story. Now, for us outsiders who are not legal analysts, we're watching and we're not scrutinizing all the information. We're not being able to see every piece of the evidence. So what happens is, in the absence of information, we will plug in our own story. And if I have been routinely seen as a racist, then I'll plug that story in. If I have been the victim of racism, I'll plug that story in. Well, when enough people share that same story, then there is a groundswell of emotion. And if it's channeled in the right direction, it is productive and it can create change. And if it's unleashed, it can create chaos. That is the trajectory.
The reason your question about Chicago,
yes.
the reason why Chicago doesn't, you know, why don't we care about black boys killing each other or killing people in the street? We do care about it. There are numerous organizations, of course, civil rights organizations across this country working on this problem in Chicago. The president addressed this problem in Chicago. It's not that we don't care about it.
There's a mother, seem to be the same.
Because the media doesn't pick up on it the same way.
Is it? I hear you, and I hear you. I hear you. As a member of the media, people are saying it's the media, but other people are saying, what about the Reverend Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons? They're, you know, potentially heading, you know, and are really playing a prominent role as a leader in the African American community when it comes to what happened in Sanford. But then you have tweets from folks like Brit Hume of Fox News. The continued prominence of Al Sharpton is one of the wonders of the world, simply amazing. Ben Ferguson, conservative radio host. Jesse Jackson is a pathetic race baiter. He's calling for calmness while screaming about a race war and real justice being served. Sick man.
See, this is what we do, though. We attack the person, right, instead of the problem. And this is what we always do.
Let's attack the problem.
Attack the problem. Stop attacking the person. So this isn't about Jesse Jackson. This isn't about Al Sharpton. This really isn't even about the countless kids that are killed in Chicago. This is about the mothers that are out on the street every day trying to bring attention to their child. There were 1,000 Sabrina Fultons. There were 1,000 Tracy Martins. But we don't pay attention to black life the same way we do to white life. This story is all sensational because it was a white Hispanic man. And let's really...
Hispanic?
Yes. Let's make that distinction. Because we want to brush over that so quickly, that he's Hispanic, so it's two minorities. He's a white Hispanic man that we have all identified at first as white. We don't see George Zimmerman the first thing in our minds.
Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
That's America's racist fault. That's America's racist fault, because everything is about the lines of racism in America. And if we don't ever start to have the real conversation...
David Webb
I know,
is
he's
shaking
smiling,
his head.
I'm sure. Hi, David. You know,
David Webb, jump in.
Conversation.
David is joining the conversation. He is now taking a seat in New York. Take a deep breath. David Webb, whoa, go ahead.
I don't know where to start. First of all, no one's actually answered your question about why there is no outrage over what's going on in Chicago. Over 77 dead, 24 wounded in the last few days since Wednesday, 5 killed in the last few days.
Yes, I did.
What? Nobody's answering that question.
Yes, I did. I said there's no focus on it.
Let him answer.
To answer your question about the white Hispanic, or your point about that, the same dynamic which produced George Zimmerman produced President Obama, but he's considered black. The white Hispanic was something that was a media construct that was created to paint Zimmerman, because of his name Zimmerman, as white. If his name was Rodriguez, we'd have a different picture. And as we now see his family, his members, his community, we look at the town of Sanford for what it is: 48% white, 29% black, mixed race Hispanic about 11%, and so on. The dynamic falls under the facts. The fact is, this was a tragedy. I think we can all agree with that. That should never have happened. But what has happened since then has been a travesty of trying to come to a predetermined outcome based on before the two actually interacted with each other. That's what the law was. And by the way, in Florida, you can charge under Florida law with bias, which they also did not do. The FBI looked into the case. They found there was no racial profiling. The DOJ can continue all they want, but they also have to meet the burden that was proven or disproven in the criminal trial. So how do they go forward? They didn't charge where they didn't have a race-based incident.
So we hear from Mark O'Mara saying this morning that this wasn't about race. He sort of agreed with you, talking about the education of the judicial system. But let me go back to really, this is to anyone on the issue. You know, some folks are saying, you know, yes, justice has been done. Others obviously vehemently disagree with that. I know that, you know, when this happened last February, folks, lawyers for Trayvon Martin's family, the Ben Crumps, were saying, listen, you know, saying for months and months and months, we just need to have a judge and a jury, let this play out. And it seems like now that it has, that verdict and that system hasn't been accepted. Is that fair?
No, I think that we have accepted the verdict. Respecting it, accepting it, and calling it what it is are very different things. I accept the verdict. The system is what it is. The prosecution did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt. There was
so do you think the system worked?
The system is broken. A broken system can't work. A broken system can't fail somebody it was never built to protect. So it's a broken system.
The system wasn't built to protect black people or white people.
Yes, it was.
No, yes, it is.
The system was built.
Mo, you're putting forward the principle that it's to protect
the majority
one and not
of
the
society. It was not, that is why we are now going back and altering the drug laws and all that. Wake up and deal with the reality of what is going on. We are dealing with our criminal justice system in our states every day and altering laws to make them more just and equal. There's an overwhelming amount of black men in prison. There is an education to prison pipeline that is profitable in this nation, that is run by corporate entities that are making money on putting black boys in jail.
Great speech, Mo, and I know how you mix the things right there.
David, respond in 20 seconds, but we got to move on.
There's a failure of education to prison pipeline that you could probably establish, and education is something that's sorely lacking, especially in the inner city and the urban areas like Detroit, Chicago, Fifth Ward in Houston, Camden, New Jersey, and so on, where there are failure rates for blacks. We have a country with frankly, a real crisis of epidemic proportions in certain communities, and its basis is economic and cultural. The prison system is another part of it, but not all of it.
Let me put a pause there, because we could have an entire show, I think, on the issues of prisons in our country. But I want to go back specifically to what's happened here with the 17-year-old who is gone, and a man who, in a sense, is gone because he's walking free, but he's a feared man. Much more on our Race in America special, including the question I know that is on the mind of so many parents in America with kids who are black, who are 17. How do you talk to your kids, to your nephews, in the wake of what's happened over the weekend? Let's talk about that next.